Welcome, Restoration, to another week of Bible stories. I hope you have had a pretty decent week. It's been cooler this week, hasn't it? It's been kind of nice. I don't know about where you live, but for us here in northern Michigan, it's been actually a pretty nice week. It hasn't been too hot. It's actually been somewhat chilly sometimes. I want to welcome you, and I just want to say that this weekend we were supposed to have our very first outdoor service. We had to postpone that due to some other things, but our very first service, we're going to do it at 6 o'clock p.m. now on July 26th. So that's in a week and a half from me recording this video, pretty much a week and a half from you watching this video, unless you're watching it the day of, which, I mean, who knows? These things live on the internet forever, so who knows what's going to happen. But July 26th, we are having our very first outdoor service. It is going to be probably in my backyard. Unless that changes in the next week. It might. Things are up in the air. We're not exactly sure how things are going to be going, playing out, all that kind of stuff. But the nice thing about being outside is we can separate ourselves out pretty well. We can keep space from each other, and we can worship together. We're going to do some singing. I'm going to give a message, and I'm going to talk more about what we are and who we are at Restoration Church. So this is going to be something for someone who may not know exactly what Restoration Church is all about, that maybe has heard the name, maybe you've talked about it with your friends, and they're a little bit curious. This is going to be something to invite them to, so that they can find out more about who we are, how we are set up, because the way that we're set up financially is a little bit different than most churches, I would say. And so we're going to kind of go over some of that stuff. We're going to go over the vision of people following Jesus. We're going to go over the mission of transparency, community, and change. And we're going to talk about taking a risk. We're going to be looking at the life of Abraham, and we're going to be looking at how he took risks and how that relates to us as well. So it's going to be a really great time. Maybe we'll do a barbecue. I don't know. Like I said, things are crazy. Things are up in the air. You never know what's going to happen. But I know that we're going to have a good time. I know that we are going to preach the word, and you're going to hear the gospel. You are going to hear about who we are and what our focus is going to be moving forward. And so that's going to be July 26th, I believe at 6 p.m. So make sure you come out to that. We'll give you all the details if you keep following us here, so that you can tell your friends and get people to show up here to find out about what restoration is all about. We're getting close. We're getting really close to starting up. We're getting really close to having services, even amidst a pandemic. I was talking to someone yesterday, and it, it was just he's going to help us out with some like accounting stuff, and it was just like I don't know why we're doing this in the middle of a pandemic. It was um, it's not the easiest thing to do to launch a church. It's not the easiest thing to do to launch a church in general, even more so in a pandemic. So we're trusting God that He's going to provide and do all the things that He has already done. I mean, the way that He has provided for us has completely blown us away. So that's going to be July 26th. Today's story, we are talking about a guy who is in Hebrews 11. He's mentioned in Hebrews 11, which is the Hall of Faith. For those of you who grew up in the Christian ghetto, the Hall of Faith is Hebrews 11, where it lists all of these people who were commended for their faith. And this guy, surprisingly, when you read his story, is one of them. This is the strongest man in the Bible. The strongest man in the Bible. The best hair in the Bible. By far, I'm sure of it. This is the story of Samson. We talked about Gideon last week in Judges 6 through 8, and now this week we're going to be in Judges 13 through 16, and we are 13 through 16, and we're only going to pretty much focus on like 5 verses today, because Samson is such a big story. Right, and I'm going to give you kind of the cliff notes as we go along on Samson, but it's such a big story, and there's some peculiarities. Wow, that's a really hard word to say. Peculiarity. There's some odd things about Samson that we need to address, and we're going to get into some of those things. And I don't know if you're like me, but as we've talked about in this series of Bible stories, in fact, Chris Brown said it tremendously. If you haven't watched the message from Chris Brown, you have to go do it. Like, stop my blabbering and whatever, and go watch that one on David, because it's an amazing message. Loved it. But we look up to these characters. What Chris had said, and what I agree with, is that growing up with these characters on the felt board and all that kind of stuff, for me, with these characters, it was something that I could never attain to. We heard about all the glorious things that they had done, the powerful things that they had done for God, and I'm like, just like, man, I could not do that. I couldn't do that. I couldn't take the bone, the jawbone of a donkey and kill thousands of Philistines. I couldn't rip apart a lion's mouth that was going to attack us, right? Not tell my parents and rip apart the lion's mouth, kill the lion, and then come back and get the honey out of it that the bees had made. That's in the Bible. I couldn't find 300 foxes. I've only seen maybe 2 foxes in my entire life. I couldn't find 300 foxes, tie them together 2 by 2 with a torch on each end, and send them out into the fields of the Philistines and burn up their crops. These are things that I couldn't do. I couldn't brace myself against 2 pillars and knock an entire temple down dedicated to a pagan god and kill a bunch of Philistines in the process. I couldn't do those things, but there are things about Samson's life that I can relate to. And we're going to get into some of those things. And those are all things that Samson did. If you want to read the story for yourself, go through 13, start in Judges 13, and go all the way to 16. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to be disappointed by this guy named Samson. You're going to be disappointed. And like me, you're going to be like, that guy was in the Hall of Faith? That guy was in chapter 11? That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, that's the story that we're going to be diving into. And actually, we're just going to go into the beginning of the story today. I just kind of glossed over the rest of Samson's life, and we're going to cover a few more details as we get going, but we're mostly going to spend time before Samson's birth, because I think there's some really practical and tactical things for us, points for us to come away with just in those first few verses. So without further ado, this is the story of Samson. Again, Judges 13:1. Again, the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Philistines, who oppressed them for 40 years. You're not having deja vu. You're like, didn't I already hear this? Are we preaching the same message? No. But it happened again. See, back in chapter 6, with the story of Gideon, which we covered last week, it says, again the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. And here we have again the Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. Then they had handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. This one, God is handing them over to the Philistines for 40 years. The Philistines were in control of Israel for 40 years. Now, the Philistines were bad people. Now, you probably know about this. You know about Goliath. He's probably the most famous Philistine who gets his head knocked off by David. He chops it off after he's already dead. But you know about Goliath probably. He was a Philistine. He was probably the most famous Philistine. Now, they were warriors and they were farmers. They worshipped the god of grain, is what they had called it. The god of grain, that's who they worshipped. And so when Samson lit those torches and sent the foxes a-running, that was an act of violence on the Philistines' religion. It was a big deal. It was a very big deal. It wasn't just some silly prank that farm boys do, like tipping cows. It's not like a tipping cows type of a thing. This was an act of violence against their religion. And the Philistines didn't like that very much. But they were bad people. They didn't allow the Israelites to have any sort of metal. They didn't want them to rise up and take over the Philistines. And so the Philistines had this mandate that they were not allowed any type of metal. Do you know how hard that is for plowing a field, for gathering crops, for cooking? I mean, they made life miserable for the Israelites. And the Israelites were getting to a point where if we can't beat them, we might as well join them. They were starting to marry off into Philistines and have Philistine names, and they were submitting themselves to the Philistines. But there was always this group of people, this remnant of people who were committed to the one true God, who are committed to the one true God. And so in our own lives, we can take a look at this and say, okay, where do I need to focus my life? Who are the Philistines in my life? And what are the Philistines in my life that I'm allowing control of in my life, that I need to let go of, that I need to conquer, that I need to let God conquer in His mercy and in His grace and in His love? What are the things that I need to let go of? What are the things that I'm doing that's evil in the sight of the Lord? I tell you, we look at the Israelites time and time again, there is application after application. So the Israelites had done evil in the Lord's sight. They've been handed over to the Philistines. And we'll pick up, this is the origin story, which makes sense because Samson is like a superhero, right? He's like Captain America, or maybe a slightly more evil Captain America. Maybe he's more like Deadpool. I don't know. Maybe. I bet you didn't think I would ever throw that into a sermon. I didn't. I just surprised myself. All right. Judges 13. We're going to pick back up in verse 2. In those days, a man named Manoah, that's clever, from the tribe of Dan, not clever, lived in the town of Zorah. His wife was unable to become pregnant, and they had no children. So this has happened before. We've seen it happen before with Abraham and Sarah, right? That they were unable to have children. We see it later on. We talked about it last week with Zechariah and Elizabeth. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife and said, "Even though you have been unable to have children, you will soon become pregnant and give birth to a son. So be careful, you must not drink wine or any other alcoholic drink, nor eat any forbidden food. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazirite from birth. He will rescue Israel from the Philistines." So Manoah and his wife encounter Jesus. Remember, angel of the Lord shows up and says something. Anytime the angel of the Lord, that's what we believe, I believe, I don't know about you, but I believe, anytime the angel of the Lord shows up in the Old Testament, it's Jesus. So they encounter Jesus. And so you probably know that you're going to have a gifted child if Jesus shows up and says, "Hey, you're going to get pregnant." "I haven't been able to get pregnant." "Well, you are now." Anytime that happens, it's probably going to be a gifted child, don't you think? There's going to be something special on his life. I know for all four of my kids, as much as I love them, as much as I think that they're awesome, and I think that they're going to do great things and unique things and make a dent in the kingdom, Jesus didn't show up and say, "You're going to have a child." Didn't happen to me. Manoah and his wife encountered Jesus to say that they're going to have a child. So he has these unbelievable expectations. Can you imagine growing up knowing who you are, knowing that you've been gifted by God, knowing that you've been set aside by God for a special purpose? Imagine the ego that would happen. Now, there's another person that this happens with, and it's Jesus himself. But Jesus was fully God and fully man, so there was no ego with Jesus. Jesus did it perfectly. As much as Jesus did it perfectly, Samson did it imperfectly. But Samson is almost a foretelling of what was to come with Jesus. Someone who is going to conquer the sin in our lives. Now they look completely different because once again, Samson was just a man. Jesus was more than a man. Jesus was man and God. And we get to celebrate that, and we worship Jesus, and we focus on Jesus, and our lives look, hopefully, like Jesus. And we spend our time focusing on Him, praying to Him, worshiping Him because of what He's done for us. And we do not worship Samson. Because again, he was a man, and so were we, and Jesus was more than that. So Samson has all of these expectations. Samson has huge expectations on his life, that he's going to rescue Israel from Philistine, and he's going to have strength unimaginable. And he's going to be set apart as a Nazirite. See, Nazirites were people who were different. Nazirites were a certain sect of, I said sect, of Israel. They were people who were to be set apart for a specific purpose. The Nazarites were set apart for the service of God. Nazarites had the only thing that the Nazarites, well, the only thing. Here's a few things about the Nazarites. Number one, sorry, I was really distracted because there was a phone ringing and I thought it was mine and it's not. And I don't know what I'm going to do when we all get back together because I'm going to be so distracted, probably, but maybe not. And now my watch just went. Okay. I just read what my first point is. We'll get to that in a minute. But the Nazarites. Nazarites were to be set apart. They look different. We can look at number 6 of a Nazarite vow. This is something that you could voluntarily become. You didn't have to be a part of a tribe or a specific tribe to become a Nazarite. Any tribe of Israel, and we've covered the 12 tribes of Israel in the past with Joseph. Any tribe of Israel, any person could become a Nazarite. You could be a man or a woman. It didn't matter if you were a man, woman, boy, girl. You could become a Nazarite. There was a vow that you took. There was a process in making it happen. It was a volunteer position that you were setting yourself apart for the service of God. And there were a few things that you were not allowed to do. Number one, you weren't allowed to cut your hair. You couldn't cut your hair if you were a Nazarite. In fact, if you broke any of the rules of Nazarites, that was when you had to cut your hair and then offer it up to the priest at the temple. And at the end of your Nazarite vow, that's the other thing about the Nazarites, is you would only have it for a term, typically about 30 to 100 days, because it's almost impossible to keep a Nazarite vow, to keep the entire thing, to keep it for any amount of time. The average was only about 30 days. Samson was called to be a Nazarite for the rest of his life. Nazarites were not meant to three things. They could not drink any alcohol or eat anything unclean. So they couldn't drink alcohol. They couldn't have wine, which means they couldn't have grapes or grape juice. So they had to abstain from alcohol. They had to not cut their hair so that they would look different. And then lastly, they were not to be around dead bodies. Even if your father or mother died, you could not be around a dead body. That was the call of the Nazarite. And it was strictly for the purpose of being set apart to focus on God and God alone. Like I said, anyone could do it. But if you broke any of those vows, you would have to cut your hair and you would have to hand it over. And then you would have to start all over again, if you wanted to. If you wanted to. Completely volunteer. Voluntarily. So the Nazarites were to be set apart. Now, the fancy Bible word for set apart is holy. To be holy is to be set apart. See, the Nazarites were to be set apart. They were to look different. They carried themselves differently. Right? They probably had a different posture about them. They probably, there were things that they were not allowed to do. And because they didn't drink alcohol, they probably never gained that freshman 15, right? You know what I'm talking about. We call it the quarantine 15 now. But the freshman 15, when you go off to college and you introduced to alcohol for the first time. And then more and more and more and more, you get your freshman 15. I didn't actually do that. I stayed home because I'm a mama's boy. And anyway, but you have that. So the Nazarites carried themselves differently. And as I'm studying about the Nazarites, I'm realizing how much our lives should mimic that of a Nazarite. Not that we need to abstain from alcohol unless you're an alcoholic. Not that we need to not be around dead bodies. Not that we need to make sure that we don't cut our hairs, but in the sense that we are set apart. We are called to be holy. Now, Jesus, don't get this wrong. Don't misunderstand this. Jesus is the only one who makes us holy. Jesus made us holy the day that he died on the cross and the day that we received his salvation. When we accept him into our lives, we are made righteous. We are made holy in the sight of God. So then we don't this is where we get a little bit different than the Nazarites. We don't try to do these things so that we get more favor or any of those types of things. The reason that we do this is because now we want to live up to what we've already attained. Right? It's the reason you don't want to let your parents down. It's the reason that you don't, even to this day, I don't want to let my parents down. It's the reason that I grow up wanting to please my parents is because they set expectations before me. I was already their kid. There was nothing I could do that would make me more their kid. I'm their kid. But there's a name that I want to uphold. So the Nazarites were to be set apart. We are supposed to be set apart. Jesus makes us holy. So as a Christian, you, me, and if you're not a Christian, I believe this is probably one of the reasons why you're not a Christian, is because we don't look any different. But we're called to be different. So they were called to be a Nazarite. Samson was called to be a Nazarite. And what it means to be holy. I want to take a look at what this means to be holy. We're going to spend the rest of our time looking at what it means to be set apart, not only as a Nazarite, but also in our lives. How can we apply this to our lives? We're going to look into some of the things that Samson did in his life and how he messed it up. But we're going to look at the call of the Nazarite and what that means for us today. I bet you did not expect to be learning about Nazarites today. All right, the first one, set apart, means avoiding distraction. Set apart means avoiding distraction. See, those things that they were not allowed to do, the things that the Nazarites were not allowed to do. I need to take a drink. My throat hurts. The things that the Nazarites were not allowed to do were meant to be set apart so they would avoid distraction. So that they would avoid distraction, specifically, not drinking alcohol, because it can be a distraction. It could be a distraction for this ministry. If beer is the only thing that we focus on in Restoration Church, we are going to miss the point completely. If our main focus is on beer, if our main focus is on beer plus Jesus, beer plus Jesus, beer plus Jesus, and I know we have a shirt and it's awesome, you could probably get one once I get more of them, but if that remains our only focus, is reaching people through beer, then we're going to lose it. It's going to be a distraction. No. Our vision is people following Jesus, and that means by any means necessary. And maybe you want to be a part of this, but you don't drink alcohol. And it's not like an addiction thing for you. That's fine. We're people following Jesus. We meet in a brewery. Yeah, well, hopefully soon. Maybe someday. We'll see when all this stuff is over. But the distraction can be that we're going to make it all about beer. We're going to make it all about how we're different. We're called different. We're doing things different. All of those are distractions from the vision of people following Jesus, from the vision of the mission of transparency, community, and change. Anything else can be a distraction. If we lose our focus on Jesus, we've lost the war. Anything can be a distraction. Ministry can be a distraction. Me doing these videos can be a distraction. Your job can be a distraction. Nazarites would only be them for 30 to 100 days because it was very hard. I mean, you've seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail. They're bringing out their dead all over the place. How hard would it be to not be around a dead body? I know if I lived in that time, I would probably accidentally step in one at least every other day. I'm a clumsy person. Oh, goodness gracious, I just stepped on that guy's leg. I got to go cut my hair. I got to go to the temple. Because I'm a very distracted person. As you can tell, this is why I was laughing earlier, because set apart means avoiding distraction. Meanwhile, there's a phone ringing over here. I'm getting a notification on my watch. We are more distracted than ever as a country. Social media, everything going on around us, we are more distracted than ever. We're more connected than ever, which means we are more distracted than ever before. And that's not good for a person like me. The worst thing that I've ever seen myself do as far as distraction is going is when I'm reading this book, I'm reading God's Word, and I have my phone set next to me, and I get a notification, like a text message or something. I will pick up my phone, look at the text message, whatever, and then I'll set the phone down on top of my Bible. Now, if that isn't a little microcosm of what's going on in my life in general, of how distracted we can be, then I don't know what it is. I'm a very distracted person. My wife will tell you this. My wife will tell you that I'm a very distracted person, that she can be having a conversation with me, and this has happened before, where she's telling me something, probably really important, but I don't know because you know, I'm me. And she's telling me something really important. And as she's telling me, she's talking mid sentence, I turn around and walk the other way, forgetting that I was in a conversation with my wife because I got distracted about something else in my own lizard brain. That didn't go well that day. That literally happened. She's saying something mid sentence. I turn around and walk the other way, and then I have to sheepishly come back and be like, you were still talking to me, weren't you? Set apart means avoiding distraction. God can be telling you something, and you just get up and walk away. One of my friends, she was telling me a while ago, a long time ago, that she journals quite a bit, and that's awesome. And I remember her telling me that there's been times where God is telling her, don't stop yet. And so she'll sit there as long as it takes, no matter what the plan is. Sometimes I think we're only paper thin deep with our faith because we're so distracted by everything else going on around us. See, Samson had an issue. Samson loved the ladies. He had a few girlfriends in his life. That was his main distraction, was women. And guys, I know that that's a main distraction for men. And we've got some great resources available for people who struggle with some sort of a sexual sin. And we've got people who can help you with a sexual sin. If you're tired of sexual sin, if you're tired of being distracted, there is a way out. You don't have to live that way for the rest of your lives. There's a way out for you. Set apart means being distracted, or means avoiding distraction. Doesn't mean being distracted. See, and our distraction will continue on as long as we're not committed. Our distraction will only go as far away as we are committed. I think they're related. The more committed we are, the less distracted we are. The less committed we are, the more distracted we are. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Am I right? Science is right, I guess. Set apart means being committed. Samson was committed to the wrong thing. Samson was committed more to his own glory, more to his own power, more to his own pride, more to his own desires of women. He was more committed to women than he was to the call that God had on his life. A very special call, and we see a talent wasted. Set apart means being committed. And when I think about being committed, I think of a friend of mine. His name is Brent. And if you're watching this, which you probably are, hi Brent, I'm talking about you. He's got 3 dogs. I don't remember their names. I remember a couple of their names, but not all of them. And so I'm not going to name any of them. But anyway, Brent has some pretty awesome dogs. He's got bird dogs, and I don't remember the name of the dog breed itself either. But anyway, what Brent does is he trains his dogs every single day. He is committed to his dogs. He will get home from work and he will run the dogs. He runs the dogs. He makes sure that they're ready because he loves to go hunting with them, and they find the birds, and it makes it probably better for hunting for Brent when his dogs will obey his commands. He is very committed to training his dogs. A lot of his life revolves around training those dogs. He goes to competitions. He goes to shows all over the country. He meets people. Some of his friends are some of these same dog people. Brent is very committed to training his dogs. Me, on the other hand, I've got 2 huskies. I still can't get one to sit. I still can't get that same one to pee always outside. I barely got the other one to sit down. My wife is better at it than me, but I don't commit a whole lot of time to training these dogs. I'm hoping that just miraculously one day they're going to learn every single command, and it's just going to be great without putting any work into it. Contrasting those 2 things. How committed are we to the faith? How committed are we to God? How committed are we to what Jesus is calling us to? Is it only when it's convenient? Or is this something that's very, very important to us? See, we tend to let our calendars dictate our relationship with God, don't we? Well, okay, let's see what's happening this week. This is my calendar. Oh, man, I might be able to squeeze God in here, maybe. If I've got time, I got to take my kids here, I got to take my kids there. If I have time, I'll take my kids to this thing or that thing. Or whatever. If I have time after work, after I take my kids to the thing, after I make dinner for the family, after I do all of this stuff, then if there's any time at the end of the day, then maybe I'll give that to God, unless there's something new on Netflix or there's something new to watch or a different book to read. Then I'll be committed to God. Are we giving God our leftovers? See, we're supposed to align to God. God does not align to us. And the sad part about Samson is he was committed to the wrong thing. And people, restoration, if you're watching this, man, I see us committed to the wrong thing. I've seen us protest more about masks than anything else. And not to make it all about COVID again. I'm so tired of talking about it, but it's the only thing that's in the news still today. What are we committed to? Are you committed to God or are you committed to America? Are you committed to God or are you committed to your rights? Are you committed to Jesus or are you committed to your job? You can't serve two masters. You're going to love one and hate the other. So what's it going to be? I believe that there's going to be a time in the future where we have to decide who it is that we're serving. And the church is going to go through some mighty, mighty pruning. Because we're weak. Our dog training is weak. Except Brent says it's good. Man. Ooh, that probably was loud. Are we fighting a battle? Are we preparing for war? Are we preparing our hearts and our minds? Are we committed? I don't think so. See, when we're committed, when set apart means being committed, when we're committed to that, then we're not trying to hide anything anymore. We have nothing in our closets that need to be hidden, because set apart means opening the door, inside and outside. We open the door inside to let God in, to show a light onto all of the things in our hearts, to say, okay, I confess, everything is yours now. I give everything over to you. God, inside, come on in. And we open up the door inside so that we can open up the door outside and show the world what Jesus has done for us. See, Samson didn't do this. Samson didn't want God to enter into his heart all the way through. Samson was so interested in his own power and his own greed and his own pride. Again, all the things that we've already talked about. And the only reason that he's listed in Hebrews chapter 11. It boggles my mind that he is. But the only reason that he is because he had to rely on God for his strength. He knew that his strength came from God. And in the very last moment of his life, he prayed one more time for strength. It's the only redeeming quality about Samson. Everything else is despicable. But I guess that's like you and me too. When we're writing the book on ourselves, are we including the despicable stuff? Are we including the things that are going to make us look human? That's hard to do. Set apart means opening the door, inside and outside. I laugh because oftentimes when we have company over, we try to clean the house. And sometimes I forget that people are coming over, or I take a nice nap and I sleep through the cleaning time. And so then I've got to get everything all organized and try to clean as clean as I possibly could. And I'm just throwing anything anywhere. I'm putting it in drawers. I'm putting it in cupboards, even if it doesn't belong there. The dog food, sure, let's put it in with the refrigerator. Let's put it in by the milk. Whatever. They're not going to open up the fridge. They're not going to open up that closet. What are the things in the closet that I can push in there that nobody's going to see? That way, when everybody comes over, they can see kind of the appearance. Oh, he's got his life pretty well together. It looks pretty clean. Looks pretty clean. Yeah, it does look clean, but please don't look in the closet. Please don't look over here. Please don't, I see that cupboard that's kind of like bulging out a little bit, that's strapped with a rubber band. Please don't open that because all of it's going to come pouring out. That's not being set apart. That's just putting on a face. That's being a hypocrite. There's an amazing thing that happens when we open up the door and all the crap flies out. See, when we let God inside, to see all of that stuff, the amazing thing that happens is he does not turn away disgusted. He doesn't turn away disgusted. He says, I can't be around this. This is gross. The amazing thing about God is he takes care of it. On the cross with Jesus. The moment of the cross is still happening right now in God's eyes. God is outside of time, so he's looking down. He sees his son on the cross. He sees the evil that we do. He sees the sin of Israel. He sees the sin of man. He sees the sin of me. And he sees Jesus right in the center of it all. On a loop. The nails. The beating. The agony and the pain. And time again, Jesus takes it. And we open the door. And we allow him in to clean it. And then he encouraged us to open the door to other people, to let people into our lives. This is accountability 101. Find someone in your life that you can share, that you can open up those doors, and let other people see the crap that you're dealing with. Because here's the thing, everybody's dealing with crap. If Samson would have just found accountability, if Samson would have only found friends. Samson didn't have any friends. He's not talked about at any point in the scripture. In any of those 4 chapters, not once does it mention friends of Samson. Not a single time. Samson was a loner. And not a single time do we find him, except for that one moment at the end of his life, do we find him praying to God. He never opened the door inside. He held it all in, and it ruined him. See, because then we get to open the door outside and show people what Jesus has done for us. And friends, that is what is going to change the world. That is what is going to make a difference. It's not the amount of beer that you drink at Restoration. It's not the amount of any of those things. It's not how cool you are on social media. It's not how right you are on social media. It's not how many times you win the argument with your friends or people who you don't agree with. The only way people see Jesus is through the transforming power of what he's done in your life. Let people see it. I need to let people see it. First Corinthians 9, 22, 23 pretty much sums up what we're doing at Restoration Church, and I hope this is true for you. says this, when I am with those who are weak, I share their weakness, for I want to bring the weak to Christ. Yes, I try to find common ground with everyone, doing everything I can to save some. I do everything to spread the good news and share in its blessing. So we're not doing these things. We're not meeting in a brewery. We're not commiserating with people just for the fact that, or for the sake of meeting with them and hanging out with them and becoming friends. No, it's all for people knowing Jesus. We're opening the door, letting people see our failures, our faults, all the things that we've done wrong, and they can see in and see the work that Jesus did in our lives. We don't have to live in that anymore, but we can show other people what we lived in and what we live in now. So the challenge for you is to be set apart in the world. It's not enough just to be set apart. It's not enough, obviously, to be in the world, but to be set apart in the world. So the challenge for you, the challenge for me, there's 3 different groups of people. Number 1, living in the world but not set apart. If you're living in the world but not set apart, you're getting too caught up in everything that's going on around you. If you're living in the world but not set apart, repent. You're distracted, repent. I find myself there often. Living in the world but not set apart. The second one, people who pretend to be set apart. I'm asking you to commit. Let Jesus do a work in your life. Don't just pretend to have everything in order. Don't pretend to have your house in order. If it's dirty, let it be dirty. Let people come in and see what's really happening in your life. Let Jesus come in, the great perfecter of our faith. Let him come in and set you apart. Stop pretending. And then the third one is people who are set apart but not in the world. If we're living in our own Christian bubbles, if we're only living and the only people we know are other Christians, we're doing this whole thing wrong. We're to be set apart in the world. We're supposed to look different. Just like the Nazarites look different, carry themselves differently. We get to look different and carry ourselves differently because of what Jesus has done for us. Commit to that, church. Restoration, I beg you. Let's do this. Let's freaking do this, man. Let's be set apart in the world. It's going to be crazy. It's insane. This risk-taking thing, we're going to talk about it more next week, I think. Yeah, next week. It's insane, but it's worth it. Don't be like Samson. Don't have the pride. Be more like Jesus and let him into your life and let him shape your life. Thanks.